film is a film genre in which songs sung by the characters are interwoven into the narrative, sometimes accompanied by dancing. The songs usually advance the plot or develop the film's characters, though in some cases they serve merely as breaks in the storyline, often as elaborate production numbers. The musical film was a natural development of the stage musical after the emergence of sound film technology. Typically, the biggest difference between film and stage musicals is the use of lavish background scenery and locations that would be impractical in a theater. Musical films characteristically contain elements reminiscent of theater. Performers often treat their song and dance numbers as if there is a live audience watching. In a sense, the viewer becomes the diegetic audience as the performer looks directly into the camera and performs to it. The 1930s through the early 1950s are considered to be the golden age of the musical film, when the genre's popularity was at its highest. Musical short films were made by Lee De Forest in 1923 to 1924, and beginning in 1926, thousands of Vitaphone shorts were made, many featuring bands, vocalists, and dancers. The earliest feature-length films with synchronized sound had only a soundtrack to music and occasional sound effects that played while the actors portrayed their characters, just as they did in silent films, without audible dialogue. The Jazz Singer, released in 1927 by Warner Brothers, was the first to include an audio track, including non-diegetic music and diegetic music, but it had only a short sequence of spoken dialogue. This feature-length film was also a musical, featuring Al Jolson singing Dirty Hands, Dirty Face, Toot Toot Tootsie, Blue Skies, and My Mammy. Musical stars such as Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers were among the most popular and highly respected personalities in Hollywood during the classical era. The Fred and Ginger pairing was particularly successful, resulting in a number of classic films such as Top Hat in 1935, Swing Time in 1936, and Shall We Dance in 1937. Many dramatic actors gladly participated in musicals as a way to break away from their typecasting. For instance, the multi-talented James Cagney had originally risen to fame as a stage singer and dancer, but his repeated casting in tough guy roles and mob films gave him very few chances to display these talents. Cagney's Oscar-winning role in Yankee Doodle Dandy in 1942 allowed him to sing and dance, and he considered it to be one of his finest moments in his career. Many comedies and a few dramas included their own musical numbers. The Marx Brothers films included a musical number in nearly every movie, allowing the brothers to highlight their musical talents. Their final film, entitled Love Happy in 1949, featured Vera Ellen, considered to be one of the best dancer among her colleagues and professionals in the half-century. Of all the musicals during the classical era, the most famous and popular was 1952's Singin' in the Rain, starring Gene Kelly and Debbie Reynolds.
I'm singing in the rain, just singing in the rain. What a glorious feeling, I'm happy again. I'm laughing at clouds.
The film was only a modest hit when first released, with Donald O'Connor's win at the Golden Globe Awards, Betty Comden and Adolph Green's win for their screenplay at the Writers Guild of America Awards, and Jean Hagen's nominations at the Academy Awards for Best Supporting Actress being the only major recognitions it received. However, it has been, according to legendary status by contemporary critics, and is frequently regarded as the best movie musical ever made and the best film ever made in the Arthur Freed unit at MGM. It topped the AFI's greatest movie musicals list and is ranked as the 5th greatest American motion picture of all time in its updated list of the greatest American films in 2007. In 1989, the United States Library of Congress selected the film for preservation in the National Film Registry. In the 1960s, the success of the films such as West Side Story, The Music Man, My Fair Lady, Mary Poppins, The Sound of Music, and Oliver suggested that the traditional musical was in good health. However, popular musical tastes were being heavily affected by rock and roll and the freedom and youth associated with it, and indeed Elvis Presley made a few films that have been equated with the old musicals in terms of form. Most of the musical films of the 1950s and 60s, such as Oklahoma and The Sound of Music, were straightforward adaptations or restagings of successful stage productions. The most successful musical of the 1960s, created specifically for film, was Mary Poppins, one of Disney's biggest hits. Other standouts include Hello Dolly and Dr. Dolittle. In the 1970s, film culture and the changing demographics of filmgoers placed greater emphasis on gritty realism, while the pure entertainment and theatricality of classical-era Hollywood musicals was seen as old-fashioned. Changing cultural morals and the abandonment of the Hays Code in 1968 also contributed to changing tastes in film audiences. The 1973 film of Andrew Lloyd Webber and Tim Rice's Jesus Christ Superstar was met with some criticism by religious groups, but was well received. By the mid-1970s, filmmakers avoided the genre in favor of using music by popular rock or pop bands as background music, partly in hope of selling a soundtrack album to fans. The Rocky Horror Picture Show was originally released in 1975 and was a critical failure until it started midnight screenings in the 1980s, where it achieved a cult status. The 1978 film version of Grease was a smash hit. Its songs were original compositions done in a 1950s pop style. Fiddler on the Roof and Cabaret were more traditional musicals closely adapted from the stage versions and were popular and critical successes. Fantasy musical films such as Scrooge, Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, Pete's Dragon, and Bedknobs and Broomsticks were also released in the 1970s, the latter winning the Academy Award for Best Visual Effects. By the 1980s, financiers grew increasingly confident in the musical genre, partly buoyed by the relative health of the musicals on Broadway and London's West End. Productions of the 1980s and 1990s included The Blues Brothers, Annie, Footloose, A Chorus Line, Little Shop of Horrors, Labyrinth, and Evita. Little Shop of Horrors was based on an off-Broadway musical adaptation of a 1960s Roger Corman film, a precursor of later film-to-stage-to-film adaptations, including The Producers. Many animated films of the period, predominantly from Disney, included traditional musical numbers. Howard Ashman, Alan Menken, and Stephen Schwartz had previous musical theater experience and wrote songs for animated films during this time, supplanting Disney's workhorses, the Sherman Brothers. Starting in 1989's The Little Mermaid, the Disney Renaissance gave new life to the film musical. Other successful animated musicals included Aladdin, The Hunchback of Notre Dame, and Pocahontas from Disney proper, The Nightmare Before Christmas from Disney Division Touchstone Pictures, The Prince of Egypt from DreamWorks, Anastasia from Fox and Don Bluth, and South Park, Bigger, Longer, and Uncut from Paramount. Beauty and the Beast and The Lion King were adapted for the stage after their blockbuster success at the movies. In the 21st century, the musical movie was reborn with darker musicals such as Moulin Rouge, Chicago, Dreamgirls, Sweeney Todd, The Demon Barber of Fleet Street, and Les Miserables, all of which won the Golden Globe Award for Best Motion Picture, Musical, or Comedy in their respective years, while such films such as The Phantom of the Opera, Nine, and Into the Woods were only nominated. Chicago was also the first musical since Oliver to win Best Picture at the Academy Awards. One specific musical trend was the rising number of jukebox musicals based on music from various pop and rock artists on the big screen, some of which were based on Broadway shows. Examples of Broadway-based jukebox musical films included Mamma Mia and Rock of Ages. Original ones included Across the Universe and Moulin Rouge. Disney also returned to musicals with Enchanted, The Princess and the Frog, Tangled, Winnie the Pooh, The Muppets, Frozen, Into the Woods, and more recently Moana. Biopics about musical artists were also big in the 21st century. Examples include 8 Mile, Ray, Walk the Line, Notorious, Jersey Boys, Love and Mercy, Crazy Sexy Cool, The TLC Story, The Princess of R&B, Whitney Houston, and Straight Outta Compton. Then in 2016, director Damien Chazelle created a musical film called La La Land starring Ryan Gosling and Emma Stone. La La Land was meant to reintroduce the traditional jazz style of song numbers with influences from the golden age of Hollywood and French musicals while incorporating a contemporary modern take on the story and characters with balances and fantasy numbers and grounded reality. The film is an homage to Singin' in the Rain and other Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers song and dance films that inspired it. The musical genre has been an impactful staple in the history of cinema, and even though musicals are far and few between, without a ton of interest from today's moviegoers, they still provide a great sense of entertainment, and without a doubt, they continue to sweep audiences off of their feet.